Have you ever wondered what it truly costs to walk away from everything you know and love? What drives someone to abandon their family, their security, their very identity for a promise that seems impossible? Today we're diving into one of the most dramatic family separations in biblical history. A story that reveals the devastating consequences of choosing comfort over calling, and how one man's compromise led to the destruction of entire cities. This isn't just an ancient tale gathering dust on forgotten pages. This is a story that mirrors the choices we face every single day. The tension between Abraham and Lot, the nephew who started as a companion and ended as a cautionary tale, speaks directly to the crossroads where character is tested and destiny is decided. And what happens next will shock you because the price of their separation was far greater than either could have imagined. But here's what most people miss about this story. It's not really about two men dividing land or settling a family dispute. Hidden beneath the surface lies a prophetic warning about the seductive power of compromise, the deadly attraction of moral decay, and how quickly blessing can transform into judgment. Drop a 777 in the comments if you're ready to uncover the shocking truth about what really destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah and why this ancient drama holds urgent lessons for our world today. The story begins with abundance, but abundance has a way of revealing what's truly in our hearts. Abraham and Lot had journeyed together through famine and foreign lands, through deception and divine intervention. They had witnessed God's miraculous provision, seen His promises unfold, and shared in the wealth that came from trusting the Almighty. Their herds had multiplied, their servants had increased, and their possessions had grown beyond measure. But success can be more dangerous than struggle. When resources are scarce, people band together. When blessings overflow, hearts often grow cold toward one another. The very prosperity that should have been a testimony to God's faithfulness became the wedge that drove these two men apart. Genesis 13 tells us plainly that the land could not support both of them dwelling together, for their possessions were too great. Can you imagine the tension that must have filled their camps? The arguments between servants, the disputes over water rights, the daily friction that comes when two powerful men occupy the same space. What started as minor disagreements between their herdsmen escalated into something that threatened to tear apart the very foundation of their relationship. Abraham could see where this was heading, and he knew that something had to give. But here's what separates a man of God from a man of the world. When conflict arose, Abraham didn't assert his rights. He didn't pull rank as the elder, the patriarch, the one to whom the promises had been given. Instead, he did something that must have stunned everyone watching. He offered Lot the first choice of the land. "Let there be no strife between you and me," Abraham said, "and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right, or if you take the right, then I will go to the left." These words reveal the heart of a man who understood something profound about God's character. He knew that divine blessing doesn't come through grasping and fighting, but through surrender and trust. Abraham was willing to let go of what seemed best in human terms, because he believed God would provide what was truly best in eternal terms. This wasn't weakness. It was the strength that comes from unshakable faith. He could afford to be generous because he knew his source was infinite. But what about Lot? How would he respond to this unprecedented offer? The choice he made in that moment would echo through generations and ultimately lead to one of the most catastrophic judgments in human history. Genesis 13:10 records his decision with chilling simplicity. Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. Do you hear what's missing from that description? There's no mention of seeking God's will, no prayer for wisdom, no consideration of spiritual factors. Lot made his choice based purely on what looked good to his natural eyes. The valley was beautiful, fertile, prosperous. It reminded him of Egypt, that land of abundance but also of bondage. It looked like the garden of the Lord, but appearances can be fatally deceiving. The text tells us he chose for himself all the Jordan Valley and journeyed east. That phrase, chose for himself, carries weight in the Hebrew text. It suggests a self-centered decision, a choice made without regard for others or for God. And the direction he traveled, eastward, is significant too. In biblical geography, moving east often represents moving away from God's presence, away from the place of blessing. Lot pitched his tents near Sodom, and here the narrative drops a bombshell that most casual readers miss entirely. The men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. This wasn't information that came to light later. This wasn't a surprise discovery. The reputation of these cities was already established, their moral corruption already well known. So why would Lot choose to move his family toward such a place? Because the grass was greener. Because the business opportunities were better. Because the lifestyle looked more appealing than the rugged simplicity of following God in the wilderness. He saw the external prosperity and ignored the internal rot. He chose comfort over character, convenience over conscience. Meanwhile, Abraham remained in the land of Canaan, dwelling by the oaks of Mamre. The contrast couldn't be more stark. Lot moved toward the cities of the plain, toward civilization and its corruptions. Abraham stayed in the open country, closer to God's presence, content with divine promises rather than human comforts. But God wasn't finished speaking. After Lot had departed, the Lord said to Abraham, "Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that you see I will give to you and to your offspring forever." The very moment Abraham demonstrated his willingness to let go, God expanded his vision and confirmed his inheritance. This is the divine economy at work. When we hold loosely to earthly things, heaven opens its treasures. When we choose faith over sight, God reveals perspectives we never could have imagined. Abraham's act of selfless generosity didn't cost him anything. It positioned him to receive everything God had planned for him. The separation was complete, but the story was far from over. What Lot thought was a shrewd business decision was actually a spiritual disaster in the making. What Abraham thought was a sacrifice was actually an investment in eternity. And the consequences of their choices would soon unfold in ways that neither could have anticipated. The years that followed revealed the true weight of their decisions. Lot's choice, which had seemed so wise in the moment, began to exact a price that no amount of prosperity could justify. Genesis 14 records how the kings of the Jordan Valley, including the rulers of Sodom and Gomorrah, found themselves caught in a devastating war. What had appeared to be a safe haven of wealth and opportunity suddenly became a battlefield where freedom hung in the balance. When the dust settled, Lot and his family were among the captives, dragged away from their comfortable life by conquering armies. The very security he had sought by choosing the best land had vanished like morning mist. His possessions, his position, his peace, all stripped away in a single day. Can you imagine the thoughts that must have raced through his mind as he sat bound among the prisoners? Had he made a terrible mistake? But God's mercy operates even when our choices lead us into darkness. Abraham, the man Lot had separated from, became his unlikely rescuer. When word reached Abraham that his nephew had been taken captive, he didn't hesitate. He gathered his trained men, all 318 of them born in his house, and pursued the raiding armies through the night. This wasn't just a military campaign, it was a family rescue mission driven by love that transcended past grievances. The victory was swift and decisive. Abraham recovered not only Lot and his family, but all the people and possessions that had been taken. It was a moment that should have awakened Lot to the reality of where true security lies. Here was Abraham, the man who had chosen the seemingly inferior land, demonstrating the kind of strength and blessing that comes from walking in covenant with the Almighty. Yet somehow, inexplicably, Lot returned to Sodom. He had tasted the bitter fruit of his choice, felt the vulnerability of trusting in human systems rather than divine protection, but still he went back. The pull of that lifestyle, the magnetic attraction of fitting in with the culture around him, proved stronger than the lesson God had provided through his rescue. This pattern reveals something chilling about the human heart. We can experience God's deliverance, witness his power, and still choose to return to the very situations that brought us trouble in the first place. Lot's story becomes a mirror reflecting our own tendency to choose temporary comfort over eternal security, to prioritize what feels familiar over what we know is right. As time passed, Lot didn't just live near Sodom, he became part of it. Genesis 19 reveals that he was sitting in the gate of Sodom, a position that indicates he had become a leader in the city, a man of influence and authority. The tent dweller had become a city official. The nephew of Abraham had transformed into a pillar of Sodomite society. But influence in a corrupt system is not the blessing it appears to be. Lot found himself trapped between two worlds, trying to maintain some semblance of righteousness while participating in a culture that grew more depraved with each passing year. The man who had once walked with Abraham, who had witnessed divine miracles and experienced supernatural provision, now found himself defending the honor of wicked men and compromising his own moral standards to maintain his social position. The internal conflict must have been excruciating. 2 Peter 2:7-8 describes Lot as a righteous man who was tormented in his righteous soul day after day by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. He wasn't comfortable with the wickedness around him, but neither was he willing to separate himself from it. He had become a prisoner of his own choices, trapped in a golden cage of his own making. Meanwhile, Abraham continued his journey of faith, building altars and calling upon the name of the Lord. The contrast between the two men's spiritual trajectories couldn't be more stark. One grew in intimacy with God while the other grew in accommodation with evil. One became the father of nations while the other became a cautionary tale about the cost of compromise. The reckoning was coming, and it would arrive with the force of divine judgment that would shake the very foundations of the earth. The cities that had looked so prosperous, so civilized, so appealing to natural eyes were about to face the wrath of a holy God who would no longer tolerate their rebellion. And Lot, the man who had chosen the best of the land, was about to discover that some prices are too high to pay, even for paradise. The angels were already on their way, and with them came a judgment so severe that it would burn itself into human memory for all generations. The choice Lot had made so many years ago was about to reveal its true cost, and the bill would be higher than anyone could have imagined. The story of Abraham and Lot stands as one of the most powerful warnings in all of Scripture about the choices that define us. Two men starting from the same place, walking the same path, witnessing the same miracles, yet ending in completely different destinations. Abraham chose faith over sight, generosity over greed, and God's promises over human logic. Lot chose what looked good to his eyes, what felt comfortable to his flesh, and what seemed profitable to his future. But here's the truth that cuts through every excuse and every rationalization. Our choices have consequences that reach far beyond ourselves. Lot's decision didn't just affect him, it destroyed his family, corrupted his legacy, and brought judgment on entire cities. His wife became a pillar of salt, his daughters committed unspeakable acts, and his name became synonymous with compromise and moral failure. Abraham's choice, on the other hand, positioned him to become the father of nations, the friend of God, and the channel through which all families of the earth would be blessed. The land he was willing to give up, God gave back to him forever. The security he was willing to sacrifice, God replaced with something infinitely greater. So what about you? What choice are you facing right now? What seems more appealing, the well-watered plains of compromise or the rugged path of faith? Remember, what looks like the garden of the Lord might actually be the road to destruction. And what appears to be a sacrifice might actually be your gateway to eternal blessing. The angels are always watching, judgment is always coming, and mercy is always available, but only for those who choose God's way over their own. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more biblical truth that will challenge and transform your life.